Hi and welcome back. Are you planning a bike trip for an extended amount of time? I was just on the road for about 7 months and I learned a lot while I was on the road, and not just things about bike maintenance or things that you might think are obvious, but I learned a lot about more emotional things, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of those, and some of them might surprise you. If you're new here, my name is Kyria, and if you haven't already seen my videos, I did a series about riding across the US and Canada. You can find that here. And otherwise, let's get started. The first one is that decision fatigue is something that you're going to encounter. Each day is different. You're always having to find food, a place to sleep, and sometimes you have to decide what route you're going to take. Sometimes the route you want is blocked, or something is, doesn't go the way you planned, and so you have to replan things. And sometimes that can get a little tiring. I had one part of my ride where I was going to go on the Kettle Valley Rail Trail from Hope, British Columbia, and it turns out, even though there were mixed reports about what was actually possible, and it was hard to kind of tell if I was going to be able to go on the route or not, and in the end I wasn't able to. I did give it a good shot, and I tried to go on the trail. I got turned around, I had to reroute, I had to figure out where to go instead, and then the second place that I thought I would be able to go, according to Google Maps and Komoot and even the Trans-Canada website, was not available either, and so I had to reroute again. And so stuff like that, sometimes just takes a toll on your emotions, and it's going to happen. It's just the way that it is, and sometimes you just need to realize that and maybe do something about it. So that brings me to my second point, which is sometimes you just need a break. And that's okay. You don't have to keep going every day. Sometimes you need a coffee when it's raining. I mean, one of the things I would do is I would stop, if it was raining, I would stop at Tim Hortons or McDonald's and just get a coffee. And even just the warm coffee and being in a dry place and being able to sit for a minute and recollect my thoughts and decide what I wanted to do, or maybe reroute my plan a little bit if I wasn't going to be able to go as far as I thought I was going to go. It was nice just to kind of reset my brain. The other thing about that is a lot of times I would actually end up talking to the people next to me, and you get a little bit of a mental boost from just having a conversation with somebody, and so that helped a lot for my mental state. So whether I talked to someone or not, just the hot coffee, the free Wi-Fi, charging my electronics, kind of getting a little bit of a reboot really helped a lot. And sometimes you may need to stop longer than that. I mean, definitely rest days are important. Even if you are a runner and you're doing a training schedule, you always factor in a couple of rest days every week, because the rest days are just as important as the non-rest days. So the training is important, but the rest days are part of the training. And it's the same thing with a long bike ride. You are going to need a rest day, and sometimes you're going to need more than one. So one of the things that I did for this trip is I kind of routed my trail through places where I had friends. So I would stay with a friend for a few days or a week or whatever. I mean, it varied a lot, and definitely the further along the trip goes, probably the more need for this you'll have, because you just start to get a little bit fatigued physically and mentally, and so a little bit longer break is nice. So what I did was I stopped to visit friends, but I also scheduled a few different house sitting options in different cities. So I would get to stay a little longer, get to explore the city, get to get off the bike for a while. I did this in Portland, Oregon, Montreal, Quebec, and Seattle, Washington, and it really made a difference to my trip. The next thing is sometimes a good night's sleep is also part of this plan. So if you're camping and wild camping a lot, I think it really helps to kind of have a break and get a motel room once in a while to charge your electronics. But same thing like with the coffee shop, you can be warm, you can get a shower, and things like that will perk you up more than you think. So it's, even if you want to tough it out or you're trying to save money, I think it's worth saying, okay, for every this amount of days I'm on the road, I'm going to stay in a motel or warm showers host or something like that for one day or 2 days or whatever. So for me, my initial plan was to do this about once a week. So that would be 4 times a month. I would be getting a motel. It did end up being more than that in the long run. And I think that that's just something you have to figure out on your own, whether the bang is worth the buck or whatever. And for me, I do think the bang is worth the buck. It really helps your mental state, makes you a little happier, makes you feel better. You can even, some days I would get there a little bit early, like right at check-in, and then wait until the last minute to check out. So essentially I would almost have not quite 24 hours, but like almost a 24-hour break. And I could just, chill, watch a little Netflix, finally have a video call with somebody, things like that that can help perk you up along the way. The other thing I did was the first night when I was first on the road, I just got a room because I knew this was already going to be something new to me. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really want to look for camping or be unsure where I was going to stay the night the first night. So I just got a room for the first night so I could ease my mental burden at the beginning. And then after that, it was easier because I was in national forests and stuff. But when you're closer to cities, sometimes it's really a pain trying to figure out where you're going to camp, if it's legal, if it's not legal, and if it's off the trail or on the trail or whatever. So getting a room sometimes can really save your mental state a lot. And speaking of video calls with somebody, that really helps also to keep in communication with somebody in your normal life, because sometimes, especially if you're traveling alone, it can feel a little isolating and you're just doing the same thing every day. And I mean, I don't get bored easily, but you could get bored. And so it's nice to have a little bit of a conversation with somebody and, kind of feel like you're part of the normal life still. And like I said, in the coffee shops, oftentimes I would find specifically older gentlemen, mostly retired older gentlemen, who I think go to the coffee shop every day for their daily coffee and chat with their older gentleman friends. And a lot of times I would start chatting with them, and it was great to have a little bit of local knowledge and just communication with somebody from the quote-unquote outside world. The next thing that might surprise you is how strong you are. And this is definitely physically, but what I mean is mentally. So some days you just don't want to keep going, you're very tired, you're worn out, and you think, why am I even doing this? But it's amazing how you can eat a little something, get a good night's sleep, and continue on the next day or even the same day, and you can do a lot more than you think you can. I think oftentimes we let the little demons in our head get the best of us, but anything that's hard sometimes is easy to say, oh, this is too hard, but it's amazing how many things, if you just keep going, they actually aren't as hard as you thought they were, or they are still hard, but you can do it. The other thing you might notice is that you will feel very small. It's amazing when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and like, for instance, in the Great Basin of Wyoming, literally I was all alone, no trees, no cars, no people. And it just felt like all of a sudden the universe got a lot bigger and I got a lot smaller. And it's kind of an interesting thing to realize, especially when you're used to being in a city with a lot of other people, or even a town with a few other people. Just being alone in the big wide world is a very interesting feeling. I wouldn't say it's necessarily intimidating or scary. It's just different. It's not something we get to experience a lot of, and it will kind of amaze you a little bit, like right now. Birds, the bees, the trees, and me. The other thing you might realize is how vulnerable you are. And again, this is not necessarily a negative thing. This isn't something I'm saying to make you scared of going out and trying it, but you do sometimes think when you're riding on a road that it would just take a millisecond for someone to be looking at their phone and hit you from behind. And sometimes you're out in the woods and you're by yourself, and you think you hear a rustle in the bushes or something like that. And personally, I'm not going to worry about that. I am going to just live my life. But you do kind of think, I'm kind of alone in this tent, and it does have nylon walls, but those aren't really very protective. Or I'm alone on this bike on a highway and there's nothing really. I mean, my helmet is maybe a false sense of security if a car hits you or something. But like I said, this isn't something I'm necessarily afraid of or I see as a negative thing. I just do think that it does give you a little bit of a realization of like how little protection we have in some instances. But of course, if you're in a car, you feel protected because you have metal around you, but really you're not much more protected there either. Or if you're in a city and you're walking down the street, you're just as likely to have something happen to you there as well. So I'm not saying necessarily you are more vulnerable, but you just have that feeling of kind of being a little more vulnerable, which is weird because I think in reality, it's a false sense of security in some of the other situations. Something else you might learn is that you're going to get a lot of attention, which I don't really like that. I'm an introvert. I like talking to people, but I don't really like being stared at. But you're going to get stared at, and because you're an anomaly, you're a curiosity. In some places you're not, maybe, but in some places you are. You're driving this fully loaded bike, and in my case, you might be wearing a red rain jacket on a fully loaded bike with a dorky looking helmet, and you're just something that people look at. And then you lean your bike against the wall at McDonald's and you go in for a coffee, and people are asking you, oh, is that your bike? And so you get talked to randomly by strangers, which is actually a positive thing. Like I said, when you're in a coffee shop, sometimes you need a little bit of a break or a human interaction or whatever, and you get that. You get it without wanting it, but you get it all the same, and most of the time it's actually kind of fun. So you strike up a lot of odd conversations with people when you're riding around on a strange looking contraption. When I was in Michigan, I stopped at this bar and I was just gonna get a snack and a beer, and these hunters sat down next to me and started talking to me and asking me about my bike. And I mean, they were just awed at the fact that I was doing this, and they bought me my beer. And I mean, they were in such a different walk of life of me, but we learned a little bit about each other. I learned a little bit about bear hunting, and they learned a little bit about biking, and it was very interesting, and part of what makes a trip like this so fun. The other one, which kind of segues from the last one, is that people are really kind. Like I said, those random guys at the bar offered to buy me a drink after hearing my story. I had people give me food and drinks and directions, and obviously there's places like warm showers where people are letting you stay with them. But I even had people in New Mexico who offered to let me pitch my tent in their yard. I mean, just all kinds of instances. I could go on and on and on, but you sometimes read the news or see the news and you think, oh man, there's just so much bad stuff going on right now. But doing a trip like this makes you really realize that, first of all, there are a lot of good people. And second of all, a lot of people that you might not get contact with, you do get contact with. And so then you realize that maybe someone in a different state or part of the country or different country or of a different political mindset or whatever the instance may be is actually not a bad person. They're a good person. They're just different than you. So this kind of brings it home a little bit, which is really nice. I think by doing a trip like this, you have a little bit more of an open mind towards other people. And again, like I said, going back to the fact that you're vulnerable. So you're vulnerable towards people, and the fact that they're so nice to you can really open up your mind that you're better off than you think you are, and people are better than you think they are. So that brings me to my next one, is that sometimes we need people. Like I said, sometimes you just want a conversation. I'm an independent person. I like doing things on my own. There's nothing better I love than being in a tent on a mountainside somewhere all by myself with just nature around me. I mean, that's like one of the best things ever. However, when I raced the Tour Divide and I had other like-minded people doing exactly the same thing, going through the same challenges as giving me tips on things that, I had no idea how to do certain things. I just never had tried it before, and I had these people that could help me. And also I looked at their setup and thought, oh man, maybe I should change my setup a little bit because they're doing it better than me. Just having those like-minded people around really was very eye-opening and helpful. So people on the road, as well as other cyclists, have really been helpful to me. And so sometimes you need those buddies, you need to find somebody to ride with or to ask questions or to learn things from. And that can be really, really priceless. So there you have it. You may think a trip like this is all physical, but there are a lot of mental things that you're going to go through when you're on the road for so long. So I'd love to hear from you. If you've ever done a longer bike trip, what kind of things did you learn about yourself, or what mental struggles did you go through, or what did you learn in general along the way that wasn't necessarily what you expected? If you're not already subscribed, please do so. I have a few more videos coming out to wrap up this trip where I'll talk a little bit about how I pack and what I pack and some of the logistics surrounding the trip. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And once again, thank you for watching, and happy trails.